Take your career to the next level. The University of South Florida, St. Petersburg is offering a master's degree in digital journalism and design. Do the entire program from home and complete it in as little as 1 year. For more information, email journalism@usf.edu or call 727-873-4544. The cost is reasonable, the experience is invaluable. From the worldwide leader in journalism, truth, and democracy, this is the Poynter Report Podcast, a joint production between the Poynter Institute and the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Now here's your host from the Poynter Institute, Tom Jones.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. One of the biggest media stories of 2026 has been the drama involving Warner Brothers Discovery. The entertainment and media company was up for sale, and it appeared for a very long time there it was going to be purchased by the streaming giant Netflix. A deal was pretty much in place, pending approval, but then Paramount Skydance, led by the Ellisons, billionaire Larry and his son David, the CEO of Paramount, refused to go down without a fight. They launched a hostile takeover bid, they elbowed their way back into the mix, and they ended up landing the big prize. They acquired all of Warner Brothers Discovery, including its cable TV properties such as CNN. It's a deal that has major implications not only in Hollywood, but it also extends to the White House. And we'll get into all of that to help us sort it out. What happened? What does it all mean? I'm really excited to welcome our guest. She's Sara Fischer, the media correspondent for Axios, and she writes the must-read weekly media newsletter, Axios Media Trends. And when she's not working on that, she's breaking scoops all over the place. You can also see her on CNN as an analyst. Sara, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you. I am such a prolific reader of your newsletter, so this is really exciting.
Well, thanks so much. We've talked a million times, like over email. I think this is the first time we've actually spoken face to face, so to speak. So it's great to catch up with you.
Yes.
Let's go. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of this thing with Warner Brothers Discovery. Not so much the beginning, but the beginning of this latest chapter. When it was coming down to, it looked like it was either going to be Netflix or Paramount. And it looked like Netflix was going to get WBD, but Paramount refused to give up. They, like I said, they launched this hostile takeover bid. They elbowed their way back into it. What was it about Warner Brothers Discovery that Paramount absolutely refused to let it go? I mean, there are a lot of people who thought WBD, maybe not the greatest business model. What was it that Paramount and Ellisons were like, no, we have to have this?
So when it comes to competing in the entertainment landscape, scale matters. Obviously, having access to more titles that you can license, that you can build new franchises off of is very important. But then in addition to that, having access to properties that you can scale some of your sports rights is also becoming even more powerful if you want to compete in streaming. So if you take a look at who could the Ellisons team up with to get that access and to achieve that scale, there weren't many assets out there outside of Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery. Remember, David Ellison was the CEO of a company called Skydance Media, right, which is really just a movie studio, before he acquired Paramount. And then, looking to scale even further, had his sights set on Warner Brothers Discovery. There just aren't many other big entertainment properties left out there for him to buy. And by the way, one thing that's extraordinarily compelling about Warner Brothers Discovery, or two things rather, it does not house any broadcast networks, which means that this deal would not have required any sort of FCC approval. They saw how painful it was to get that FCC approval to acquire Paramount as Skydance. And then two, Warner Brothers Discovery is global. They have a very significant presence, especially in Europe. They have the European rights to the Olympics, and they have huge market share for things like television and news in places like Poland and other countries. And so for Paramount, they're not as global. This was a coup. This was an opportunity for them to expand globally, to get access to more sports rights, to get access to a huge library of content in Warner Brothers Pictures, and to get access to a lot of TV studio dominance. You know, they had said that they don't plan to divest these cable networks that they are inheriting. And I don't know if that's going to be the case long term, because they don't think that they're worth much. Right. But having access to some of that studio programming does matter, especially when you're just trying to build up a library for a big streamer.
When it looked like Warner Brothers was going to go with Netflix, And then Paramount launches this hostile takeover bid. And at some point, it was going to need Trump. Trump was, it seemed like he was, for a minute there, said, like, I'm not going to get involved. He told Tom Yamas of NBC, he's like, look, I don't want to get involved with this. But it also felt like there were times where he clearly had an interest. He's buddies with the Ellisons. I think it's clear that he would like to have seen Warner Bros. Discovery end up with Paramount. What sense do you get on how much of a role that Trump played, if any, in any of this?
Barely any.
Really?
He really didn't care. He cares about CNN. So he did make a comment that he thought that CNN should be sold because its current owners are not doing enough, essentially to politicize it the way that he wants.
Right.
But he really didn't care a lot about this deal. What Trump likes to do is to make it seem like he has power. So he is going to throw just enough comments out there to make it sound like he's involved and that he can move the needle. But in reality, he didn't care much. And in reality, Tom, he really can't move the needle. Even if Trump tried to politicize the process by convincing his Justice Department to sue to block a particular deal, that lawsuit would need to be held in court, and an independent judge, would need to decide on the merits of the case. And we have seen in the past with media mergers, if Donald Trump has tried to pressure his DOJ in the case of AT&T acquiring Time Warner to sue to block that deal, even when they did present a lawsuit, I sat in court, Tom, for 3 months. That judge ruled against the merits of that case. And so I don't think that Netflix bowing out of the process had anything to do with Trump. In fact, I reported that Ted Sarandos never even actually met with Donald Trump the day that Netflix pulled out of the deal, that meeting was canceled. So I think that the reality was that this deal came down to financial terms, but it's easier for everybody to just say, oh, Netflix walked away because they didn't want to deal with regulatory headaches. In fact, if Netflix were to have faced any regulatory headaches, I think that it would likely have come from Europe, which tends to be much more discerning of big tech, and possibly state attorneys general in the United States, in particular California, that are worried about antitrust laws being violated as it pertains to their workforces.
I'm glad you brought up your story, because I wanted to mention that. It was a couple of weeks ago when this whole thing came to a head. Paramount was given a chance to make its best and final offer, was the way it was described. They did. And then Netflix was given a few days to respond, and they responded almost immediately. They said, we're out. And the interesting thing was, as you mentioned, as Sarandos was at the White House that day, and then that's where you had the big scoop. We all had heard, like, he wasn't there to actually meet with Trump. As it turned out, he didn't meet with anybody at the White House, according to your reporting. Take us through like that. Like, what was why did he even go to the White? Like, what was that point of him going just to, I don't understand what went down that day as far as that meeting, non-meeting, whatever. Can you fill us some of the gaps on that?
Yeah, well, he was supposed to meet with Susie Wiles, who is Trump's right hand. And those meetings are incredibly valuable, even if not to get approval for this merger. Having strong ins within the White House matters for a company like Netflix. Let's talk about why. One, Trump has alluded to the fact that he wants to impose what is, we know, not actually going to happen, but a big tax on companies who are essentially localizing their production overseas. Netflix is one of the biggest global streamers, so they would be very, very much impacted by a policy like that, although nothing is going to come from that, because you really can't put taxes on services or tariffs on services.
Right.
And then two, Netflix faces some really weird, unique challenges. Around the globe, you have a lot of ISPs, internet service providers, that want to charge Netflix for increases in ISP use by consumers, essentially pass the burden off to the big streamers who are taking up the bandwidth. They need support from the US government when foreign countries are trying to impose these types of penalties on their companies. We've seen Trump go after Europe for trying to impose too much regulatory burdens and hurdles on our American tech companies. So there's a lot of reasons why somebody like Ted Sarandos would want to be on the good side of the president that are completely outside of this particular deal. And so for Ted, they knew what they were going to do even before he walked into the White House. They knew they were walking out of the deal. But why cancel a meeting with the White House officials who are going to be paramount, no pun intended, to your future across many different regulatory battles around the globe.
Right. Afterwards, Netflix put out a statement. It was sort of along the lines of like, we wanted WBD, we didn't need it, certainly at the price. Like, were they disappointed, or do you think they feel okay walking away saying,
I think they feel fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, Netflix is the one word I would use to describe them is they're prudent. They make smart, decisions based off of what makes sense financially for the company. And they also know that by walking, Tom, they are going to leave two of their biggest competitors entangled in a global regulatory approval process that will take many months, if not at least a year. And they leave one of their other biggest competitors in Paramount saddled with an unprecedented amount of debt. So the other thing that they consider when they walk, it's not like they walk, their competitor comes in and takes this asset and it's considered a massive win. Their competitor, in some ways, is going to be tied down by this asset. They're going to be one of the most highly levered companies that Hollywood has ever seen. So for Netflix, walking was not just because they didn't absolutely need the asset, but there was actually advantages to walking as well. Do
you think, is there any, sometimes like when you buy a house or you buy a car, like as soon as you walk away with it, like, it's the old buyer's regret, should I have done that? Is there any sense of that within Paramount, or are they just thrilled that they end up winning this thing?
No, I think they're thrilled that they ended up winning this thing. They have been trying to get their hands on this asset since September. So they knew what it would, they knew it would come down to having to be incredibly highly levered and taking on a ton of debt to get access to this asset. And the thing to note about the buyers of any company, let alone a media company, is that an asset is worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And so for them, their desire to get their hands on this asset, they're not a PE firm, Tom. They're not just trying to buy something to juice profits and get richer. For them, their money machine is Oracle. Right. And they wanted access to this asset for cultural impact, to have power. And that is really, really, really different from a buyer who would just be taking this on for financial reasons. And so because of that, I don't think that they feel buyer's remorse. I think the only buyer's remorse would come from taking on so much debt, and they knew they were going to have to do that.
Right. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, if you like this conversations about the media, please give us an excellent rating. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're traveling, working out, going on a walk or whatever, you can listen to us on Apple, Google, Spotify. We appreciate you listening. Don't forget that excellent rating. When we come back, what does the future have in store for CNN? A big piece of this deal. We'll be back with Sara Fischer right after this. Hey, everybody. If you enjoy this podcast, can I ask you for a quick favor? Please subscribe to the Poynter Report newsletter, where I bring you the latest media news and analysis each and every weekday. If you already subscribe, thank you. But don't stop there. Check out the other great newsletters we offer at poynter.org/newsletters. Every Wednesday, my colleague Kristen Hare spotlights what's happening in local newsrooms across the country in Local Edition. On Fridays, my editor Ren LaForme rounds up the smartest stories from Poynter in his newsletter, Open Tabs. If you care about misinformation, fact-checking, and getting to the truth, you'll love Factually. And if you're looking to sharpen your writing, leadership, or ethics skills, Poynter Pro Weekly has you covered. Go to poynter.org/newsletters and sign up today. So, Sara, the part that many people who listen to this podcast and something that you and I cover regularly is about CNN. We're interested in what's going to happen to CNN now. So far, David Ellison, as you would expect, he said the right things when it comes to CNN about having independence and all that. But what's the sense you get about CNN and its future? Is it too early to know, or do you think that the Ellisons and Paramount have definite plans in mind for the future of CNN?
I think CNN is at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of what they're focused on. I think the most important thing for them is, in the short term, getting regulatory approval, and then in the medium term, how they maximize synergies and opportunities in combining the companies. I know they want to combine the tech stacks of their streamers. That is a very, very top priority for them. And with that, they're probably going to look at a large-scale integration of tech stacks across advertising, sales, marketing. They're going to need to reconstruct and restructure their workforces to eliminate duplicity across things like legal and HR. So all of those things are going to happen first. In terms of what happens to CNN, whenever you're a news company that is owned by a larger entity, you always face the risk that somebody is pulling the lever of your news judgment in order to bolster other parts of their portfolio. For example, with the big criticism right now of the Washington Post is that Jeff Bezos is sacrificing, editorial to be able to win government contracts, right?
Right.
With CNN, where it's different is that because it's a cable network and the owners and the managers at Warner Brothers Discovery very aptly negotiated very strong distribution 3-year deals, with the telecom providers, CNN still mints a ton of profit, unprecedented amount of profit. Even though those profits are declining year over year because cable is in terminal decline, CNN is a very lucrative entity. It's $600 million a year.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is, even though the Ellisons have said that they believe that the cable networks are worth $0 for sure, they think that they're nothing. They recognize the fact that a lot of these cable networks still mint money. And so what you're probably going to see happen is they'll hold on to and retain the cable networks and take those profits and put them towards building out the big Hollywood entertainment giant that they wish to be. For CNN, that means that you're stuck in the same problem that you've had for many years now, which is that instead of your profits being able to be reinvested into digitizing and modernizing the network, they're going to feeding your corporate parent. With Warner Brothers Discovery, they did actually give CNN a big chunk of those profits. I think it was like $60 million to help with the modernization of CNN and building a streaming asset and all of that. But $60 million is still only getting to keep 10% of your profits, Tom. It's not a lot.
Right.
So I think you're going to see a similar thing here. I think that a lot of CNN's money is going to go towards bolstering Paramount. It's not going to go towards revitalizing the network. And that's the biggest risk. In terms of like politicizing the network, I mean, anytime you're going to do a deal which requires broadcast approval. So let's say Paramount for some, FCC approval, for some reason wanted to buy Scripps or something like that.
Right.
Then I think CNN would be in a very perilous position because the idea would be, okay, you pull back on the punches at this one asset at CNN, or in the case of Skydance and Paramount's deal, CBS,
right,
in order to gain regulatory approval for the broader company. What I would tell you, though, I just don't know what they're going to buy or if they'd ever buy anything again for the long term. They are saddled in so much debt. I can't imagine that being the case. So the good news for CNN, I can't see David Ellison or anyone else directing CNN to pull punches so that they can get a deal approved because I don't see any other deals coming into play.
Right.
So I think CNN actually will be okay. I just think the real issue is going to be, do they get to retain enough of their profits to make this a really strong digital first entity? And the answer is, I hope.
I agree with you. I think the CNN is on the list of things that are on the Ellison's plate every day. I think CNN probably right at this moment is near the bottom of that list. I guess the concern at CNN these days, though, is, as you mentioned, Paramount owns CBS, which includes CBS News. They have a new editor-in-chief, Barry Weiss, who's come in controversially, I think would be a fair way to put it. And of course, the concern at CNN is, what if Barry Weiss is put in charge of CNN as well as CBS? Are those concerns legit at all, or is it way too early to know about that?
It's way too early to know. But even if that were the case, it's just such a massive, massive footprint for one person to make niche decisions on day to day.
Yeah.
I would imagine if the idea is that you put Barry over all of news, so that would be both networks, CNN and CBS. First things first, she's going to have to manage 2 different teams with 2 very different products, different sales footprints. I think she's not going to be able to get nichely involved day to day.
Right.
But if she does have the power to cancel an interview or things like that, then yes, I can see why people at CNN would be nervous. What I would say is that when it comes to Barry, I think she's looking at CBS as this dying traditional broadcaster, and she's trying to make it appeal to more people and younger people. I don't think she's out here trying to ultimately bring CBS to the far right. I think that's a misinterpretation of who she is and what she's aiming to do. And I also think that even if you were to bring as much of a skeptical lens to this and say, well, she was only doing that so that the Ellisons get Trump's stamp of approval for the Warner Brothers deal. Okay, once the deal is over, they don't need to be pandering to the administration anymore to get corporate deals done. So what becomes her incentive there? I think it's more, it's going to be less doom and gloom than people are making it out to be. Like I said, Tom, I think the bigger issue is financially, is she given the resources, if the Ellisons don't really prioritize news, to make these networks as modernized as possible? That is the biggest question and potential problem.
I'm interested. Yeah, you got into some of it right there of Barry Weiss so far at CBS. I mean, to me, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I mean, yeah, you obviously we've seen some high-profile names walk away. Anderson Cooper from 60 Minutes and Scott MacFarlane just recently walked away. No one has said Barry Weiss's name publicly about them leaving, but there's been some reporting that maybe she had something to do with it. Yes, she held the 60 Minutes story, but it ultimately ran. I watch 60 Minutes just every week, and the stories seem as strong as ever. So, and look, here's the other thing. I don't know that I would have brought her in as editor-in-chief, having no experience in TV news. They're third in the mornings. They're third in evening news. Why not try something? Like I said, I don't know how to feel about Barry Weiss, but I'm with you. I don't know that it's all awful, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. Also, remember, Gayle King just re-upped her contract. So for as many naysayers saying, look at all the people leaving, look at all the people staying. And I also think that when you are somebody like David Ellison, you need to bring someone in who you trust. Right. Even if they're not the most experienced in broadcast, if it's a trusted confidant, that might matter more than anything. And I think that they have similar worldviews. They're both very, pro-Israel. Mm-hmm. And I think he trusts her.
Obviously, when you look at this deal, I mean, it's more about the entertainment than the news part of it. Netflix wasn't even interested in CNN, right? I mean,
correct. They had no intention of acquiring the cable networks, and so Warner Brothers Discovery was going to spin out its cable networks into a separately publicly traded company.
Right. And the other part of this too is like, I think and this is probably partly when I say our fault, I'll say people like me, is we look at this through the lens of, Trump's getting involved. Trump will be out of the White House, presumably, in 2 years. Paramount's in this for the long game. They're not thinking about the next 2 years. So I don't know that any decisions that's going to be made are based on the next 2 years, like you just mentioned a minute ago. I mean, they're in this for the long haul, right?
Yep, I think so too.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing I wanted to ask you about. It's a little bit of a different topic. I'm going to go away from Paramount and all that. You see so many journalists these days who are laid off or decide to leave their jobs. They go off to do independent work. That usually means Substack. What are your thoughts on Substack as sort of a business model for these independent journalists? On one hand, yeah, they have the freedom, and it's certainly a good platform, but there's just so much of it, and so many of these journalists out there. What's your thought? What does the future hold for Substack in terms of independent journalism, or just independent journalism and content creators? Can you make it as an independent journalist doing these types of things?
You absolutely can. One thing I think journalists need to consider is what type of content are you creating and who is it valuable to? If you are, and I would consider myself this, to be a B2B journalist, I cover a lot of deals and regulatory battles. The people who need that insight are people who needed to do their jobs. They're professionals, they're lobbyists and lawyers and venture capitalists and publishers and technology professionals. Because of that, these are people who would likely be willing to pay a premium to get those insights. So I have a paid membership at Axios. It's $495 a year. Substack is great for that type of a transaction because it is a subscription first platform.
Right.
But if you are somebody who has a massive consumer audience, and maybe that consumer is not willing to pay a lot, maybe your best bet is to lean into advertising, and a platform like Beehive, which has developed a really strong advertising network, is the better platform for you. Let's say you're a journalist and you're a part of a collective and you have access to third-party legal, HR, technology support, then maybe you don't have to siphon off 10% of your revenues to Substack, which takes the biggest cut out of any email platform, because you already have access to the resources that you're paying that premium for using Substack.
Right.
So it just depends on like, what do you have access to, what are you producing, and who is your audience? And then you choose a platform accordingly. I think the biggest challenge to creators that want to go independent is if you have been a longtime journalist who's focused just on producing content and that's it, this is the shift. Now it's not enough to just produce the content. You also have to market the content.
Right.
You have to do, membership or subscriber engagement, which often means webinars and things like that. You need to be on a broader array of platforms. So a lot of independent journalists do podcasts like this. They do video casts, or they're contributors to TV networks like myself, or they're doing events. And so you have to be multi-platform in a way that, a lot of people are just not used to. I think that's the biggest challenge of going to Substack. You're not going to make all your money just on the emails.
Right.
It's one part of the equation, and you have to be comfortable and willing and eager to be sort of a jack of all trades.
Let me add, last thing I'm going to ask you about newsletters. You write a terrific newsletter, Axios Media Trends. I'll tell you how good it is. I once had a colleague of mine publicly say that their favorite media newsletter was Sara Fischer's Axios newsletter. And I thought that was great, except I write a daily newsletter.
Yeah,
and this person told me. But I would have been mad if she'd have said Stelter or Darcy or the 704 Boys or whatever. But since it was you, I was okay with it. What's the, have we hit the peak of newsletters, do you think? Or are we riding a plateau? Like, how do you see newsletters fitting into all this now?
You're so kind for those words, Tom. And what I would say is there's a big difference between a weekly and a daily. A daily is something that's part of your habit. Yeah. You need that information every single day to do your life. A weekly is meant to be something that you can rely on to give you something very new and distinct, because the journalist presumably has a whole week to put together those insights. So I try not to even compare dailies to weeklies because there's such different utilities. Right. But in terms of the hitting the ceiling, I do think there's subscriber fatigue. People don't want to be paying $1 bajillion for all these email newsletters. But I think for B2B journalists like myself, reaching professionals, we face a little bit less of that because you can typically expense some of those subscriptions. If you are trying to reach everyday consumers with a subscription, it's definitely a lot harder as we reach this fatigue. But in terms of, are email newsletters dead, or are they plateauing, things like that, so long as email continues to be one of the main forms of communication in America and in the world, newsletters are not going to go anywhere. I just think that newsletters are going to have to adapt and evolve and become more sophisticated as email adapts and evolves and becomes more sophisticated. Gmail has much stronger filters now for things like spam. And so if you're not opening a newsletter, Gmail could quite literally send you a reminder at the top of your inbox saying, do you want to unsubscribe to this? That's a reality that newsletter writers didn't have even just a few years ago. So I think you just have to be sharper. You have to be more intentional. And that means that the newsletter's got to have great content, but it also has to have great ad load. It has to look nice. It has to be able to load on your phone. It has to have a good mobile experience. All of those things matter.
Well, I'm not just saying this. You write a terrific newsletter, and it's always full of stuff that I hadn't seen anywhere else and don't see anywhere else.
Thank you. And ditto, Tom. I appreciate yours as well.
Well, thank you so much. Tell people how they can get your newsletter and get your work.
Thank you so much for that. It's axios.com/newsletters. My newsletter is called Axios Media Trends. And we have two options. You could get the free version, which comes out every Tuesday, or you could get the paid version, which gives you the Tuesday access, but it also gives you a whole slew of exclusive data-driven reports, analysis, and scoops. So if you're somebody who's in the media industry or just cares a lot about the business, that could be a great opportunity for you as well. Yeah,
I think it reaches far beyond. I think I write a newsletter not only for other media people, but for just the general public, just the citizens. And I'm always linking to your stuff because I think they would be interested in it. So great stuff.
Thank you, Tom.
Sara Fischer, thanks so much. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Thanks for listening, everyone. A reminder, we have 4 seasons of the Poynter Report podcast now available for you anytime. You can watch seasons 3 and 4 on YouTube, and you can listen on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Check out past episodes, Jen Psaki, Chuck Todd, Tom Yamas, Sally Jenkins, many more. And we put one out every 2 weeks. And don't forget the good rating. Thanks so much. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening. The views and opinions of this episode's guest and the host are not associated with nor reflect those of the University of South Florida. The podcast is produced by the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Executive producers are Elliot Weiser and Ren LaForme. Our producers are Tom Jones and Carolina Raboni. Production assistant is Ariel Makis. And our director is Christopher Campbell. And a special thank you to Neil Brown and Dr. Mark Walters.